If you own a home in Henderson County that's on well water or a private septic system, and a significant portion of the homes in this area there are things happening on the buyer lender side of transactions right now that you need to understand before you list your home to sell. Buyers are asking more pointed questions about water quality and septic condition than they ever have before. Lenders are requiring more documentation as a condition of financing, and post-Hurricane Helene, the scrutiny around drainage, water intrusion, alternate septic systems on mountain lots has increased significantly. Today, we're going to walk through exactly what buyers and the lenders are requiring, what North Carolina sellers are legally obligated to disclose, and what we see happen in real transactions when these issues surface under contract versus when sellers get ahead of them before listing.
We're Suzanne and Ryan McAbee with the LivePlayWNC real estate team in Hendersonville. We've helped homeowners all across Henderson County sell their homes using our PCOM selling system, a process that we built specifically for this market to help sellers get prepared, get their home in front of the right buyers, and keep every dollar they've earned on the table.
And everything we do starts with one thing: knowing exactly what's happening in this market right now. Not the national headlines, not last quarter's data, what's actually happening in Henderson County and within the 28739 zip code that day, because that's what helps you make a smart decision about one of the biggest financial moves of your life. Let's start with what's happening on the buyer side, because understanding what buyers and their lenders are system requiring helps sellers understand why this matters so much more than it did even 3 or 4 years ago.
For buyers using conventional financing, which is the majority of finance buyers in Henderson County, lenders require a well water test as a condition of loan approval on any property with a private well. That test checks for coliform bacteria, nitrates, pH level, and other contaminants, depending on the lender's requirement. If the test comes back with coliform bacteria present, which is more common than most sellers expect, the lender will not fund the loan until the issue is resolved and a retest passes.
For septic systems, conventional lenders require a septic inspection confirming the system is functional and has adequate capacity for the home's bedroom count. FHA and VA loans have additional requirements. The FHA in particular has strict well and septic distance requirements and will not approve financing if the well and septic are too close to each other or to the property line.
In this post-Helene climate, we've seen an additional layer of scrutiny emerge about drainage and water intrusion on mountain properties. Buyers whose agents or inspectors are doing their job are now routinely asking about flood history, drainage patterns around the foundation, and whether any water intrusion occurred during that storm. So elevation certificates are being requested earlier and more consistently than they were before September 2024.
What all this means practically is that well and septic issues that might have been negotiated quietly under contract 2 or 3 years ago are now coming to the surface earlier, documented more thoroughly, and scrutinized more carefully by lenders who are increasingly cautious about mountain properties with any of those kind of risk factors. Sellers who know their system status before listing are in a fundamentally different position than sellers who find out under contract.
Now let's talk about what North Carolina requires sellers to disclose. We want to be clear. We are not attorneys and this is not legal advice. For specific disclosure questions about your property, you want to consult your real estate attorney. What we can give you is the general framework that every Henderson County seller should understand.
So North Carolina uses a Residential Property Owners Association disclosure statement. It's a form that sellers complete before listing. That form asks specifically about the water supply source, including whether the property is served by a private well, the sewage disposal system, including whether the property uses a private septic system, or whether the seller is aware of any defects or problems with those types of systems.
And the key word throughout the North Carolina disclosure form is aware. So sellers are required to disclose what they know. They are not required to conduct an investigation that they haven't done. But, and this is important, if you know your well has tested positive for bacteria in the past, if you know your septic system has had issues, if you know that there was water intrusion during Helene, those things need to be disclosed. Failing to disclose known material defects in North Carolina creates legal exposure for sellers that no sale price is worth.
The SmartGov portal maintained by Henderson County is a useful resource for sellers trying to understand what's on record about their septic system. That's where you can find permits, installation records, and repair histories if there have been any. If you're not sure what documentation exists for your system, that's a good starting point before you engage with a buyer who's going to ask that and find that out properly.
The practical takeaway on disclosure is this. Proactive disclosure from a position of knowledge is always better than reactive disclosure after a buyer's inspector or lender flags something. The seller who knows their system status with documentation and does this proactively is in a position of strength. A seller who gets surprised under contract is in a position of weakness, and weakness under contract can be expensive.
Let's talk about what we've actually seen in some Henderson County transactions, because the abstract risk becomes kind of real when you watch it play out. In this year alone, we've seen a couple of transactions that required septic tanks after inspection that needed to be replaced for various reasons. That's about a $4,000 item that needed to be negotiated under a tight due diligence timeline.
And the pattern we see consistently is that sellers who find out about a well or septic issue while they're under contract Face a compressed timeline, a buyer who now has negotiating leverage, and a lender who will not move forward until that issue is resolved. In that scenario, the seller is making decisions under pressure, paying more than maybe they would have paid if they addressed the issue on their own timeline, making concessions that they wouldn't have needed to make, or in the worst case, watching a deal fall apart entirely.
The sellers who get ahead have a completely different experience. They know what they have, they've addressed what needs to be addressed, and they have documentation ready when the buyer's lender asks for it. And they go through the transaction with confidence rather than anxiety. And that's not a small difference in experience. It's the difference between a smooth close and a very stressful one.
So let's get a little more specific about what every seller with well and septic should check before listing. Think of this as your pre-listing well and septic checklist.
Well water test is the first step. Get a current water quality test within the last 12 months before you list. A basic California nitrate test runs about $100, give or take, $150 depending on the lab. And a more comprehensive panel that covers additional contaminants can run up to $300 plus. If the test comes back clean, you have documentation ready for the buyer's lender. If it comes back with an issue, you have time to address it on your own terms. Shock chlorination for coliform and filtration systems for other contaminants before it becomes a contract contingency and negotiation item.
Septic inspection is second. Have a licensed septic contractor pump and inspect your system before listing. A standard inspection and pump out in this area runs about $400 to $700 or so. What that inspection tells you is the current condition of the tank, the drain field, and the system's capacity relative to the home centric count. If there are issues, a failing drain field or a tank that's past its service life, an alternative system that needs attention, knowing that before listing gives you option. Waiting until a buyer's inspector finds it gives you pressure.
For alternate systems like mound systems and other non-conventional septic designs that may have a pump and other parts, those are common on steep mountain lots in Henderson County. The inspection is even more important in those situations because these systems have specific maintenance requirements, a shorter service life than the conventional systems, and higher replacement costs. Buyer's lender seeing an alternative system on their inspection report is going to ask some questions. Having a recent professional inspection showing the system is functioning properly and maintained answers those questions before they become a problem.
And third, post-Helene drainage documentation. So if your property had any water intrusion or drainage issues post-Helene, then you want to document the before, during, and after. So photos of damage, contractor invoices for repairs, permits pulled for any structural work. This documentation does two things. It satisfies the disclosure requirement completely, and it demonstrates to your buyers that issues were identified and professionally addressed, rather than ignored or covered up.
And finally, know your septic permit record. That portal for Henderson County, the GIS system has septic installation and repair records. Before you list, pull your party's records so you know what's on file.
So let's finish up with the cost reality, because this is ultimately a financial decision and the numbers make the case clearly.
Proactive well tests and septic inspection before listing are probably going to be somewhere in the $350 to $1,000 at most total. The time required is probably 1 to 2 weeks just to schedule and complete it. It's not a heavy lift on your part as the homeowner. The position that it creates, though, is full knowledge of your system status and documentation ready for those buyers and lenders so that you don't have surprises under contract.
The math just isn't close. A $500 proactive investment in knowing your system status before listing is one of the highest return pre-listing expenditures that a seller can make. The alternative is discovering a $15,000 problem at the worst possible moment in your transaction. So we've seen both scenarios play out, and the proactive version is much better in every way.
So if you own a home in Henderson County with a private well or septic system, or both, very common, the single most important thing you can do before listing is get that status of the systems and documentation ready. We're talking about water test, septic inspection, and any kind of drainage documentation if your property was affected by a leak. Not because something is wrong, but because knowing what you have before a buyer finds out is always better than finding out under contract together.
This is the kind of preparation that separates sellers who close smoothly from sellers who close stressed or don't even close at all. It's part of what we walk through in the prepare phase of every peak listing that we take. And it's the kind of local market expertise that we think every Henderson County seller deserves before they make one of their most significant financial decisions in their life.
So if you have any questions about your specific property situation and things to check out and where to find that, that's a conversation we're happy to have. The link below takes you to our consultation calendar. And again, we're Ryan and Suzanne with the LivePlayWNC real estate team, and let's get you on the path to solve.